Hello, friends, and welcome to the PrepWell podcast. I'm your host, Phil Black. And if you have an 8th, 9th, or 10th grader with big aspirations, like the Ivy League, or military service academies like West Point, ROTC, or athletic scholarships, boom, you've come to the right place. My specialty, my superpower, if you will, is preparing families for these competitive programs. I'll teach you what your child should do, when they should do it, and how you can help. So stick around and prepare to out-prepare. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the PrepWell podcast. If you've been following this podcast, you may have noticed that the last few episodes have been a bit on the longer side. So I wanted to try to balance things out a little bit today with something shorter. Today, I want to share a simple parenting strategy that has worked well for me over the last few years, and I hope it might do the same for you. This is not necessarily an episode that you want to share with your child. I know many of you listen to the episodes while driving with your children. That's great. That's a great strategy. This would not necessarily be the greatest episode, but it wouldn't be the end of the world also. And hopefully, you won't have to pull out this strategy all that frequently. But when you do need it, it's nice to have. My guess is that the sweet spot for this strategy is probably from about 6th grade to 10th grade. And of course, there are all kinds of exceptions on both ends of this range, but 6th to 10th grade is a good starting point. I call the strategy the 60-second rule, and it has to do with preventing lying. As we all know, as kids grow up, they do dumb stuff. Not just some kids, but all kids do dumb stuff to varying degrees. Stuff that they know they shouldn't be doing. And when we call them out on it, their knee-jerk reaction is often to lie. And I know that's tough to say, it's tough to admit as a parent, but it's just their go-to survival instinct. They lie. Sometimes it's so reflexive that they don't even realize they're doing it. And you don't want them to trap themselves like that. But before we get into the details of the 60-second rule, let's talk about the nature of mistakes that kids make, and have always made and will always make. As a parent myself, knowing that my kids are going to screw up, I actively hope and pray that they start off making what I call low consequence mistakes. These are mistakes that are bad, they need to be addressed, but they aren't life-altering mistakes. And I want them to make these low consequence mistakes early and often. I want them to get as many reps of these types of mistakes as possible, within reason, of course. In fact, when they do make these low consequence mistakes, even though it's frustrating and I know I have to address it, I'm actually smiling inside because I know they need the reps. And I want them to understand how consequences work before they make, or they're tempted to make, any high consequence mistakes, which include drinking and driving, unprotected sex, drug abuse, social media blunders, unwanted pregnancies, vandalism, plagiarism, cheating. These are mistakes that can be really tough to recover from. And so the subject of today's episode is what makes every bad mistake even worse, which is lying about it. The 60-second rule is all about preventing the lying, which in our family is not tolerated and is treated harshly. Our family rule of thumb is that lying is 10 times worse than the underlying infraction itself. For example, let's say you did something wrong that would normally get you punished for, say, 2 days. Maybe you're not allowed to use your phone for 2 days because of something you did. If you then also lied about it, the penalty would be 20 days. 2 days times the 10x penalty. And for a teenager, there's a big difference between 2 days and 20 days without a phone. So that tends to get their attention. So how does the 60-second rule work? Let's say you catch your 7th grader playing Fortnite before they've finished their required daily reading. Because the rule is that they can play 30 minutes of Fortnite as long as they've already done at least 60 minutes of outside reading, meaning non-school reading. And you know that they haven't done their daily reading because they left their reading book in your car overnight. So there's no way they could have done it by now. So you walk into their room, You wave your hands frantically to get their attention, and when they finally acknowledge your presence and take their headphones off, you ask them, "Hey, did you finish your reading already?" And of course they reply, "Yeah, I did my hour already." And then you go back, "Oh, you did? Okay, just to confirm, you've already read your legend book for an hour today." "Yeah, I did it this morning when I woke up. Can I get back to my game? My friends are waiting." At this point, you don't argue, you don't question them, you don't scold them, you don't call them out in any way. Instead, you implement the 60-second rule. You say to them very matter-of-factly, "Okay, I heard your answer, thank you. And just in case you forgot the question I asked, I'm going to repeat that question one more time. And I want you to think about your answer for the next 60 seconds without saying a single word. Not a word. I'm going to set my watch. And while you're waiting, keep in mind the 10x rule. The question was, did you finish your reading before you started playing your game?" And then I would start the stopwatch, or sometimes it's my phone, and then we wait. At this point, your child has to sit there quietly and decide whether or not it's worth it to lie to you again. Because they were hoping that their first quickie lie would have done the trick, because you're so busy and distracted that you don't have the time or the energy to deal with their BS, so you just let it slide. But apparently this time that's not the case, because they've been hit with the 60-second rule. They now have to sit in awkward silence, wondering whether you know something that they don't. And then they start remembering the other times that this happened, when they took their chances with their quickie lie and got burned and got hit with a 10x penalty. And they sit and they wait and they think, and the seconds tick down. And they do the math on the probability that they'll get busted. And at the end of the 60 seconds, and you wait and you let them hear the watch go off or your phone buzzer go off, I calmly ask them again, "Okay, let's try this again. Did you finish your reading before you started playing your game?" And their answer is, "No, I did not." And you say, "Okay, thank you for telling me the truth. And since you came to your senses, I'm only taking away the computer for 2 days instead of 20 days. So you made the right call on this one. Better late than never. Go get your book from the back of my car and get back to reading, and talk to me in 2 days about getting your computer back." At which point, your child, defeated, will shuffle out to the car to retrieve their book that they left there last night and get back to reading. Now, this is an example of, in my opinion, an extremely low consequence mistake. Something that I could have easily ignored, I've ignored before, or not made a big deal out of. It would not on its own be a life-altering event. But if these small transgressions go unnoticed and unchallenged over time, and our kids never get taught how the process works, the 10x factor, if you will, and they don't feel the consequences, even for something as benign as this, then we're not laying the groundwork for the next, potentially more high consequence mistake. So the idea is that you use these low-level mistakes to prove your point and train your children to tell the truth, even when it means that they'll still get in trouble. Because the cover-up is almost always worse than the crime. And once you've implemented this system for a while and the kids have seen how it works, you eventually don't have to go through the theatrics of setting up the timer on your phone. As soon as you whip that phone out and start setting up the timer, they immediately tell the truth because they know how the system works. They know that you probably know something that they don't know, and you get to the truth a lot faster. And then, God forbid, if or when you're faced with a high consequence mistake, you're much more likely to get to the truth right away. So to sum up the keys to the strategy, number 1, start early, just like everything else with PrepWell Academy. Number 2, make sure the rules are clear. Number 3, make sure you follow through with the punishment if it's warranted. And number 4, try your best to implement the plan with low consequence mistakes first. Set the stage early. Of course, the ultimate goal is never having to deal with the high consequence mistakes at all. And if you can pull that one off, you're doing a very good job of parenting. And I wish you luck with that. In fact, if you have been able to limit your kids' mistakes to the low consequence variety, Put that in the comments below so we can all congratulate you. And if we think you're lying, stand by for a 60-second countdown. That's all I've got for you today, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for the continued support. If you know a parent with a 6th, 7th, 8th grader, 9th grader, 10th grader in high school that might find this helpful, please share the episode with them. You can do that by finding that small box with a tiny arrow pointing up. That's the share button. Click on that button. Text your friends a link to this episode with a little personal note from you recommending that they give it a listen. Of course, if you have questions, comments, or an idea for an upcoming episode, please reach out to me by email. You can DM me on Instagram at PrepWell_Academy. Check out our blog, Facebook, connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you. Until next week, goodbye, good luck, and never stop preparing. This podcast is brought to you by PrepWell Academy. PrepWell Academy is my one-of-a-kind online mentoring program that delivers to your 9th or 10th grader a short, highly relevant video from me every week, every Sunday, in fact, where I give them a heads up about what they should be thinking about to stay ahead of the game. To get these valuable lessons into your child's hands, please head over to PrepWellAcademy.com and enroll your child today.